Let me tell you a story. The room is so dark, with one small window, no larger than a shoebox. It's up so high that you need to stand on a chair to see out of it. But they don't allow me to have a chair in here. They say it's for my own safety. They don't want me to jump. I've heard others try to escape that way, but my restraints keep me secured to the bed as I watch the days pass by. I watch the small reflection of light cast from the window move slowly across the room as the sun rises and sets. The walls keep the sound of screams out at night. It can be very loud in here. I feel safe though, secured from the outside world. Safe from her. The nurse called from the door, interrupting my thoughts. The doctor's ready to see you. He will join you in a moment. I can't stand that doctor. I've told him everything I know, and he keeps making me relive that moment. He enters the room with a small clipboard and a pad of paper in one hand and a metal chair in the other. He sits nearly across the room from me. Shall we begin? He calls to me. I nod. Tell me the story again. Try to remember everything this time, he said. It was the summer of 1982, and my senior year in college. I had volunteered at a nearby all-girls summer camp called Camp Wolf Creek. It was tucked away in the Appalachian Mountains of West Virginia. The camp was a bit run down, and the girls who attended the camp were typically of an underprivileged background. It was a second chance program ran by the court. I had 5 13-year-old girls in my cabin, 4 of whom knew each other from previous years at camp, and they started the summer as a clique. They excluded my 5th camper, Rebecca. Rebecca was unlike the other 4. She was quite tall for her age, stunningly beautiful, and very athletic. I would have guessed that she was one of the popular girls in school, but here at camp, among the disadvantaged castaways, she stood out. It was my assumption that the others were jealous of her. They could be very cruel and had a dark sense of humor. At first, I believed they were loners and withdrawn from the world around them, as most troubled adolescents are. Later, I would discover there was a much darker reason for their seclusion. But at the time, I believed it was my duty to ensure they all find a way to get along that summer. But despite my best efforts, this would surely never happen. I often took the girls to the camp softball field in hopes they would learn to bond. Rebecca dominated the field, catching every fly ball, often hitting a home run, and she had a wicked fast pitch. My other girls presented a lacking effort and shown very little interest. The first couple weeks of camp, I watched as they mocked Rebecca, often playing tricks on her. One of the girls brought a Ouija board, and they would stay up late playing with it by candlelight. I believed at the time it was all in fun, but it appeared to really freak out Rebecca. The girls had a passion for the darker things in life and got great pleasure from how much it upset her. They would perform seances, often chanting and reading from some sort of satanic Bible. At the time, their interests seemed innocent and pretty typical of camp life behavior. After all kids told ghost stories. My biggest concern was how much it affected Rebecca. She was so sensitive, and they knew that, so they would prey on her weaknesses. Occasionally, they would take it too far. They splashed her shorts with ketchup to appear as blood, placed spiders in her hair, and once placed a dead cat on her bunk. Sometimes I would wake at night to the sound of Rebecca in the restroom, vomiting as the other girls laughed and cracked jokes at her expense. I recalled how mean girls could be at that age, but I would always tell Rebecca that they were just playing around, so she should just grow up and fight back. She was quite ill and very bothered by the other campers, but she insisted that I not call her parents. I found it a bit peculiar that she wanted to stay in this environment and sustain this type of abuse, but I honored her wishes, believing that her life at home must be that much worse than it was at camp. On nights that she didn't spend in the restroom, she would frequently hide under her bed. Her childlike behavior was getting pretty annoying. Several nights, she even woke me, tugging hard on my hair, sometimes so hard that she pulled strands from my head. She would cry that there were candles lit in the four corners of the room. As I rose, I saw nothing, and explained that it was probably just the others burning candles for light. We often had heavy rainstorms and the power easily flickered in and out. Truthfully, I thought the girls were playing tricks on her, and I grew even more annoyed by Rebecca's extreme reactions. Fight back. The bullying never really stopped that summer, and it continued to wear on her. She was no longer eating much, hardly participated in softball anymore, and became very distant. Her beauty even began to fade. Her eyes became dark and sunken in, and her cheekbones were more pronounced. She even appeared shorter, as her posture was so slouched. However, the four bullies seemed to thrive that summer. I watched as they devoured their food, and Rebecca just pushed it around on her plate. They became stronger and faster than her on the softball field, and had nearly outgrown all of their summer clothes. They developed into young beauties, no longer adolescent and awkward. It was as if they were getting stronger and more beautiful, the more delicate and unpleasant Rebecca became. Almost as if they were feeding off her in some way. They were capturing her strengths and taking them on as their own. Early in the summer, I would never have thought of Rebecca as weak, but as the others grew tougher, Rebecca became more frail. She stood little chance when they attacked her one evening around the campfire. I suppose Rebecca's strange behavior and soft demeanor made her a tempting target to the summer camp bullies. I almost couldn't blame them, because even I had grown tired of her pitiful nature. She always needed somebody to rescue her over the smallest things. They surrounded her and pummeled her to the ground. I ran to separate them, but before I could get there, she was able to break free on her own. I was actually kind of pleased to see that she had grabbed and clutched a fistful of hair in the scuffle. At last, she had done something to defend herself. Before I could say anything, Rebecca took off running back towards the cabin. I chased after her as quickly as I could. She was hiding under the bed again, so I pulled the old metal frame away from the wall to make sure she was all right. A large, deeply engraved pentagram on the floor caught me by surprise. But these cabins are practically ancient with odd carvings and graffiti all over the place. I wondered, who had carved it though? Was it old? Or had my campers done it? Did they do it just to mess with Rebecca? I got down on my knees close to her as she whispered, "You never stopped them." That night, I left the cabin after the girls fell asleep so that I could call Rebecca's parents. I knew this was no longer a problem for a young camp counselor, but the numbers listed on the camp forms were now disconnected. Is this why she didn't want me to call home? I sat for several minutes thinking back of all her abnormal actions and changes that summer. A pit grew in my stomach as I recalled what a strong beauty she once was, and now looking like a ghost of her former self. Her obsession with pulling my hair at night, how distant she became with the others, her vomiting, lack of appetite, crying and hiding under the bed, her claims of candles in the 4 lit corners of the room, and the carving of the satanic pentagram hidden beneath her bed. In that moment, I realized I'd let this go too far. Something was seriously wrong with Rebecca. And her words, "You never stop them," rang over and over in my head. Panic set in. As I rushed back to the cabin, it began to downpour, and a crack of lightning caused the power to go out across the camp. In the distance, I could see candles flickering in the windows of my cabin, and as I approached the door, it blew open. All the girls except for Rebecca were kneeling on the floor. They were speaking in tongues and calling in the 4 corners. "North, south, east, west, hear our cry, now wake from your rest." The pentagram still exposed on the floor and the candles now burned a black flame. From under the bed emerged a feeble Rebecca. She crept out, and in her bony hands were voodoo dolls, formed from human hair. Ours. There was 1 for each girl, and a 5th that was for me. Rebecca said to me once more, "You never stop them, and now you will all suffer." Several minutes pass by before the doctor responds. The silence is deafening. I hate this part. "Rebecca, I hate when he calls me by that name. What did you do with the counselor?"